What's up, guys? It's Chopper Force King here, and welcome back to another episode of Wednesdays with the King, or as I like to call them, Creepy Wednesdays. And during Creepy Wednesdays, or Wednesdays with the King now, or whatever, I find a creepypasta. Either someone suggests to me, or I just find on the internet, and that interests me. And some of you guys wanted a Zelda creepypasta. And, well, congratulations, you got one. Now, this creepypasta is heard under many names. You may have heard of it, or you may not have heard of it. I mean, I've heard of it, but I never really researched into it until about now. But I read it, I just read it like a couple of minutes ago. Not really a couple of minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, jeez. And it's really good, and I want to share it with you guys. I won't read it all. I'll just probably skip over some unimportant sections. But yeah, this is called Phantom Epona, or Epona. If you click on the link down below, it'll just take you to this link that says Epona, but it's called Phantom Epona. I sometimes hate Nintendo for making me want to take nostalgia trips into old games. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, still my favorite Zelda game to date, was due to be released for the 3DS. I would constantly fangasm while watching the commercials for it on TV. Seeing the images related to the game kept making me want to play it more and more, kept making my my old GameCube because I knew I had the game for that system. Eventually, I caved. Watching Link being mega awesome on the screen for what seemed like the 100th time made me want to revisit the Land of Hyrule again. So I scuttled upstairs and into my room where I hauled out the GameCube and hooked it up to my small television set. Then I rummaged through my video game drawer until I found and pulled out the case for the Zelda collection. I excitedly popped the disc into the GameCube and booted it up, bouncing in my seat slightly as the system introduction played on screen. I selected Ocarina of Time from the game menu and couldn't help but smile as the title sequence started to run through. Initially, I wanted to start a new game, start fresh from the game, but as I looked at the top file, Link, my previous and completed game, a different feeling overwhelmed me. I wanted to see Epona again. Epona was a cornerstone for my Zelda obsession, although I was never able to actually play Ocarina of Time on N64 when it first came out. Friends who owned the game would allow me to ride on the famed horse, even if they weren't too busy trying to beat a dungeon or something. My heart sank a little. I knew I wasn't going to see Epona again if I started a new game, but it'd still be a while before I could rescue her from Lon Lon Ranch in order to ride her again. After some consideration, I decided, what the hey, and selected my old vow. I could always start a new adventure later. Alright, let's see. The game resumed as it should, post-Ganon, with Link in the Temple of Time. Link was wearing the red Goron tunic, which I preferred to the Kokiri green one, and he was equipped with a mirror shield. In the C button area, I had the Lens of Truth, the Ocarina of Time, and Dense Fires selected from my past adventure. But seeing as I was going to be taking a quick jaunt with Epona, I went to my adventure and selected the Fairy Boat to place my Lens of Truth, just for fun. Let's see. I stopped for a moment to take in the surroundings, and I grabbed out my ocarina I pressed C to take out the ocarina, and I fiddled with the buttons for a bit to figure out which one made what sound, and I played Epona's song and gleefully hummed along with a familiar melody. As the song was finished, I heard a familiar whinny and a cacophony of hooves as Epona came galloping toward Link. Blech, can't read that. A wide grin spread across my face. There's my girl, I softly said to the screen. Oh, that's kind of creepy. I've never called Epona that. I never said there's my girl. Anyway, once Epona slowed to a stop, I moved Link over to her and mounted. It took me a few seconds to get Epona face the direction I wanted, but as soon as I pressed A and her Link slapped the horse with a quick cry, I was off into a world of bliss. It had been so long. I wanted to ride Epona everywhere I wanted to ride Epona everywhere I could in the game for as long as I saw fit. After traveling to Link Hyrule for some time, jumping some sort of fences along the way, I decided to head over to the Gerudo Valley since I loved how the beat of Epona's hooves matched up with the music there. It does. I just now realized that. It does match. Anyway, however, as it had been a couple of years since I last played this game, so I was a little lost as to where I was supposed to go and knew there was a bit of exploring needed. I headed towards the looming rock cliff when which I knew had the interest to Kokiri Forest somewhere in its midst. I figured as soon as I found the forest, I'd be able to orient myself in the right direction. But something strange happened along the way. Not too long after I turned to run along the cliffside, a hole appeared below Link and Epona, seeing them both into the ground as the screen cut to black. When the game reappeared, Link was just standing in a place I've never seen before. The area had no title and was set at nighttime. It was walled off and covered in plants of greenery, reflecting hues of orange from the roaring bonfire in its center. Music, which sounded like that of the many boss battles, was playing, and the area was crawling with an assortment of monsters. But the most notable enemies were something that didn't seem normal to the game. They looked like Hylian guards riding on horseback, all of them white. All of them were white, translucent, and had ethereal blue glow about them. The only reason why I knew they were dangerous was because of Navi, who cried, "Watch out!" and prompted me to lock in on them in yellow. Blah. A flurry of whinnies was heard along with the music, adding to the chaos of the movement around me. I tried moving about, attacking enemies to keep them at bay. How in the world was this even possible? I knew there were set holes scattered around Hyrule that Link could fall down in order to obtain items and rupees, but nothing like this. For a moment, I considered the possibility of a hacked game, but scrapped the idea, knowing that even though I had received the trilogy from a friend Pyre, I had been playing the game for years without incident. This had to be something else. It wasn't long before I noticed Epona in the midst of all the chaos. She was standing nearby the fire, rearing and whinnying frequently, as though she was in distress. The ethereal guards were circling around her as though they were trying to round her up. That's when something hit Link, making him recoil in pain as it dealt a good deal of damage. I rounded on whatever was nearby and noticed I was one of the guards. I locked onto it and struck with Link's sword. Much to my surprise, however, the sword did nothing. It just passed right through the character, leaving it unscathed. There must be some trick then. It's a Zelda game after all, I told myself. I racked my brain for an answer as best as I could. Then I remembered Epona. Epona! She must be the key to beating these things and getting out of here. I raced over to where I had seen the horse, taking out a couple of Tektites along the way. Once I had approached the surrounding queen, I don't know. The ethereal guards advanced on me, and I knew I had to act fast. I pressed a button for right C, activating Din's fire, and I watched as animation played for the attack. Unfortunately, even though the magic fire did take out a handful of enemies that were within range, it too did nothing to the guards. No longer bound in time by the animation of Din's fire, two of the guards swung their swords at Link, knocking him backwards and depleting a total of 5 in the process. I winced as I watched Link crash down onto the ground before he regained his footing. Come on, think. There's gotta be something else I can do. Then another idea hit me. Perhaps I need to knock the guards off their horses somehow. Eyeing the ferry boat, I got an idea. I charged forward again, this time keeping Link well out of range of the ethereal guards' attacks before raising the bow, locking onto one of them as I did. Once I was confident enough, I took my shot and prayed that this time I was right. Found out very quickly that I was wrong yet again, as I watched the arrow pass right through the guard and hit Epona instead. I sat there, wide-eyed, as I saw the flash of impact appear directly on her neck, and I watched in confused horror as Epona reared once more, only this time bursting into flame as she whinnied. She then collapsed to the ground and faded away like an enemy would after it had been defeated. I paused the game right after this, feeling the blood drain away from my face. Did I just kill Epona? I tried to wrap my mind around it. Link's weapons and attacks should have been effective on the horse. You can hack and slash at Epona with a master sword all you wanted and it still won't do anything. So how come my arrow was able to hit her? Perplexed, and half hoping this whole fiasco was nothing more than a elaborate glitch, I resumed the game and focused my attention on getting out of the unknown area. Unfortunately, the guards have now dispersed from the area where Epona once stood and started heading towards Link. Not knowing what could be used to defeat them, I figured this would be a good time to start running. There wasn't anywhere to go really, so to stall on time, I tried everything in my arsenal against the strange ethereal enemies. I tried everything. I even chucked Deku nuts at the guards as a last resort. Nothing seemed to work, and if they so much as touched me, they would cause devastating amounts of damage. As the amount of other monsters and replenishing resources diminished, my frustration grew. How was I supposed to get out of this area when I couldn't even leave a scratch on the enemies that were chasing me? Fewer and fewer the defeatable enemies became, until there was only one left, a single light, which I have been trying to avoid. I sighed as I approached the creature to attack it. I had been running around for a good 20 minutes now, so I was more than ready to give up at this point. However, once I defeated Light, the area froze and the cutscene played. The ground started to shake and rumble, and everyone's attention, including Link, turned to the bonfire, which instantly extinguished. For a moment, the shaking stopped, then something which appeared to be a horse with a black saddle burst out of the ground where the fire once stood, crying out with a scream of a redhead. Ugh, God, redheads. The phantom horse whisked around the area, killing off all the ethereal guards in his wake. Then the scene cut to a terrified-looking Link who took a couple of steps backward as the animal approached him. Its body was white and translucent, revealing the skeletal structure underneath. Though it had its tail, the mane for its head was missing as were its ears. The skull face bore two black sockets with red pupils in the middle. The last thing I saw of the cutscene was a pulsating image of the horse before the screen turned white and faded to black again. When the game resumed, I found myself in Hyrule Field, and sweet Jesus, the skeletal horse was right beside me. I immediately pulled out my sword and shield to defend myself, but the horse just stood there, looping with a typical animation of the game. Suspicious of the creature, I made Link creep towards it. Much to my surprise, I was able to walk right up to the animal without doing anything to me. It even gave me the option to climb on when I moved by the saddle area. I leaned forward in my chair and wondered for a moment, could it be? I selected the ocarina and played Epona's song. Sure enough, the phantom horse began to push Link backwards, like Epona does when you play the song next to her. I sighed with relief. This creature was nothing more than Epona. But how did she come to look like that exactly? Was killing her with the arrow a feature to alter her appearance? I shook my head, figuring I'd just let it be for now. Sure, Epona looked a little spooky, but it was still Epona, and if I didn't save anything, it should all go back to normal next time I play the file. I'll be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to test out the phantom Epona. I admit, I wanted to ride the alternate horse to see if she would function differently. So I saddled back up and took off to find Gerudo Valley once more. Epona seemed to move the way she was supposed to, though the carrot gauge was a ghostly shade of blue rather than normal orange, but it didn't take me too long to realize something unusual. Link was taking damage even though there was no enemy around to inflict it. Eventually I caught on what it was. It was Epona. She was hurting Link as I rode her. I immediately stopped the horse and dismounted. Link's hearts were low enough as it was after that last ordeal. He didn't need his health to bleed any further. This aspect of the feature made me really sad though. As cool as it was, I would never be able to ride Epona again if she was in this form. I grumbled bitterly. There goes my fun riding the skeleton horse. Then I got an idea. If I could go replenish my hearts before riding Epona again, I could still make this work. But as I headed up Hyrule Field to find patches of grass to cut, Epona started acting strangely. No sooner had I left her side than she reared up and let out her redhead cry. Epona then disappeared and reappeared nearby Link, repeating the same sequence as I continued to move away from her. I felt badly as I slowly came to understand why Epona was acting like this. She wanted Link to ride her instead of walking away on his own. I'm sorry, hon, I whispered to the screen. It's not that I don't want to ride you, it's just that I can't right now. It was like Epona heard me. As soon as I said it, the horse suddenly reappeared in front of Link, but instead of rearing, she stood stationary, forcing Link to mount her. I had no control over the next few seconds as Epona took off with a screaming Link on her back. She ran back to the area where the hole had appeared earlier, damaging Link all the while. Suddenly, she jumped to the ground, causing the scene to cut to black like it did before. I was confused. What the heck was going on with this game? When everything reappeared, Link made a noise as though he landed after falling off a high cliff. He flashed red as he sustained more damage. He was dismounted from Epona once more, the horse a little ways to the right of him. Her animation seemed to be on the regular loop again. I realized that this was the same nameless area that the bonfire in it prior, though this time it appeared to be sundown and there were no enemies in sight. I looked at Link's health gauge, only a quarter of a heart left. Crap, I thought. I need to replenish his hearts, and soon. I took a look around the area to see if I could find anything of use or even a way out. There appeared to be nothing in the area at all. Nothing, that is, except for a single ethereal blue bone that lay right beside Epona's front hoofs. Navi brought my attention to it. Based on how the game was playing out so far, I wasn't too keen on attempting to touch the glowing item. Instead, I tried to interact with anything else in my sight. After bouncing off the walls by slashing at them for a few minutes, I gave in and approached the area where Epona was standing. I stood Link by the mysterious bone and looked at it through his eyes. Was this really the only thing I could interact with? If so, why? I didn't really understand the purpose of it at all. I don't know how long I was standing there trying to decide whether or not I should press A. Heck, I don't even know why I didn't clue into the fact that I could just reset the game and be done with all this. I guess I was just really in the moment. Finally, and with a lot of hesitation, I pressed the button. I watched as Link bent down to pick up the eye before screaming and bursting into blue flames. The game over music sounded as Link fell down. I can't say I was surprised at this point and sighed as a such a yes. when the game asked me if I wanted to continue. At least it was over now. Things should go back to normal. But things didn't go back to the way they were. The game resumed at a cutscene in Hyrule Field. The moon rose as the trademark howl of Wolfos was heard. The scene then panned over to the field before cutting to a single white arm which came bursting out of the earth. I then watched in horror as Link proceeded to haul himself out of the ground before the gameplay reverted back to normal. My jaw slacked. What the heck? Link was wearing a white tunic now. The rest of his body was varying shades of gray, the darkest of which being his gloves, boot, belt, and sheath. What I had really noticed though were his eyes, which were black with red dots, where his pupils should be, just like Epona's. The health mirror was completely empty, but all the hearts were surrounded by a distinct white glow. The magic gauge was now blue instead of green. After double checking my inventory, all Link's arms and weapons were shades of white and gray like he was. Navi was also seen to be missing. I gulped a little. This game had gone from weird to creepy. I sat there, allowing Link to go through his owl animations as he decided what to do next. I wasn't ready to shut off the game. I wanted to know why all of this was happening, let alone what was going to happen next. I took out the ocarina, shuddering a little as I briefly saw Link's blackened eyes before they shut. The ocarina was white now with rust, or what I hoped was rust, running down from the hole where their holes were. I played Epona's song and cringed as each of the notes shook in a high wail, as though I had taken the joystick and messed around with the pitches. When the music sequence played, the pattern that surrounded Link was also white and gray, and the melody continued in its haunting tone. After the song was finished playing, nothing happened. There was no sign of Epona at all, it was as if I was out of range to call her, which made no sense since Link was facing in the direction of Lon Lon Ranch. He goes on to describe how he's in Hyrule Field and two Wolfos, Wolfos, the wolf creatures, they go and attack him, and instead of attacking him, he can talk to them for some strange reason. And they say things like, "Death to Hyrule," or "Hail Ganondorf," or some things say like, "What are you looking at, kid?" or they would just laugh. And he goes on to go to Lon Lon Ranch, and he doesn't really see anything, difference, except for, Malon humming Epona's song. And the first thing he noticed, though, was Ingo, who just stood outside the gate where the horses were, and he was in a terrified stance, where both of his arms were covering his face, and he stood on one leg, shivering and staring at Link in fear, and he was afraid of Link, and he asked Link not to harm him, and he thought it was odd for Ingo to be reacting to Link like that, and he found himself becoming more uneasy and questioned whether it was a good idea to venture in the fence-off area next. He found Malon in the fence, and she was looping in a crying animation, and the horses would whinny and run away from Link as he approached her, and Malon's face was contorted in anguish. He spoke to her, and she said, "Why? What did you do to my Epona?" A shiver went down him, he says, and he assumed Malon was referring to the Phantom Epona, and he had forgotten that Link was actually the main reason for her death. And he felt, really guilty he had a heavy heart, and he wanted to try to find Epona. And he pulled out his ocarina again and played Epona's song. And she came out of nowhere, jumping over the fence. She appeared out of the shadows and ran towards Link, and Malon and the other horses moved out of the way as she approached. And Navi emerged from the left corner of the screen, shouting Link to say, she said no in Link. She, trying to tell him, don't do that. Link turned back to look at the fairy, though, and Navi, whatever, swooped towards him, and Link slapped her, down to the ground. And, he said he would laugh, but, under these circumstances, no. It was just cold and emotionless. And Navi slowly floated forward and asked why. Link looked at her, and his eyes were both piercing yet somewhat forlorn at the same time, and he felt a chilling sense of sorrow. Navi zoomed towards where Link had disappeared after going out the gate, and just said Link. And then, out of nowhere, someone says, "It seems that the boy has made his final choice." Navi and the others turn around, fearing the presence of Ganondorf. He stood with a smirk on his face and his arms crossed over his chest. "It looks like the end for all of you then," he says. With that, he threw his head back in a horrible laugh, which was far more sinister than he remembered. Ganondorf's laugh continued, echoing to the night air as the scene cut back to Link and Epona, who slowly disappeared from sight as the sun began to rise. The screen then faded to the words "The End" appeared in white on screen. The title sequence of the game started up, and he stared at it for a while, and he wasn't really sure what to make, what he wanted to make up of the scene. And he turned off his GameCube, and he still hasn't found an answer. He tried to look all the just any hacks and glitches describing that, but he checked his save file again a few days ago, and see if it didn't, mess up anything. And everything was back to normal. However, on closer inspection, something caught his eye, which made his blood run cold. There, on the down C option, was the image of a white ocarina. Now, this creepypasta was quite long, so this episode might be quite long for a creepypasta review. We're running on 21 minutes here. It's alright. This creepypasta, it isn't the worst one in the world, and it's not, what am I trying to say? It's not the worst, actually. It's probably one of the better ones I've ever read. I don't know, it just changes my whole aspect of, Epona. What if this was really an ending in Legend of Zelda and Nintendo was just keeping it from us? What if it was just in one of those old cartridges that only a certain number of people got, and then Nintendo had to recall them, and then all that business. But see, this wasn't a cartridge though. This was a CD. This was part of the Zelda collection on GameCube, and I personally never had that collection. But I did own a GameCube. I never had that. I played Nintendo 64 Legend of Zelda when I was a little kid. Even though I didn't know what to do, I still played it. And if I were to hear about all that stuff back then, I probably wouldn't play. About all this stuff, or I would play and I would try to see if it was real. And to be honest, is this real? It could be. It could be a hack or a glitch, but he says he hasn't found one. But, someone's probably made a ROM where that happens. Someone made a ROM of Ben. This one was pretty good. Phantom Epona. Or Epona. Where it says in the link that it'll be called Epona when you go to this page. But yeah. Skeleton Epona. Sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway. I'm sorry. My sister just barges into my room, without even, knocking on the door first, without consideration. Man. Anywho, before I was rudely interrupted, this creepypasta is very good. I wouldn't mind seeing actually a mod with a bone Epona, a skeleton Epona. But preferably one that wouldn't damage you every time you try to ride it. Just one of those things. Alright guys, the link to this creepypasta will be down in the description below. Please like and favorite if you enjoyed this creepypasta. I will be doing another one Wednesday. Please subscribe to become a knight today. And I'll see you guys tomorrow with a new Adventures in Minecraft Land, or tonight if I decide to record something else. I don't know, I might not have the time, but yeah, until then, later.